Hi everyone, my name is Emma and I'm part of the 2Rivers Festival. So this event starts at 8:30. Feel free to turn your video on or off, whatever you're comfortable with. And if possible, we're going to show a video, so if you can mute yourself during the video, that'd be great. And then unmute yourself if you have any questions. So just a note also, this is recording, so we can share it with people after. So yeah, if you're not comfortable with that, please feel free to turn your video off. So again, this event is part of the 2Rivers Festival, and the 2Rivers Festival celebrates and appreciates the Speed and Eramosa rivers in the city of Guelph. We want to thank Andalyn from the Butterfly Conservatory for sharing your passion for our rivers with us. And thanks to all of you for attending this event. So the festival is organized and run by volunteers and involves a number of community organizations. So please support these organizations that are doing good work in our community. Please also notice the sponsors on this page that we're sharing here. They've helped make this festival possible. So yeah, we've had about 40 events online. They've all been rescheduled to be online due to the pandemic. So this is our third last event. We have one more tomorrow, and then one last one, I think on the 30th. But you can check the 2Rivers Festival website at 2riversfestival.org, and you can also check out our social media. On Twitter, it's the number 2Rivers Festival, and on Facebook, it's the same thing. And Instagram, we are under Wellington Water Watchers. So yeah, thank you again for coming, and I will hand it over to Andalyn.
Sure. Well, welcome everyone. I was just saying to Emma, it's really nice of you guys to join us on this Friday night before Canada Day. So I've been working at Cambridge Butterfly Conservatory for over 10 years now. I'm the naturalist. I love bugs. Bugs is what I do, and moths have always been my favorite. And probably because they're kind of the underdog of the insect world, as it were, but they're really beautiful and important. That's some of what I hope to show you tonight. So because it had to be done virtually, I have been out in the field several evenings this past week, recording myself, trying to get some of the moth action to give you a taste of what it's about. And I've made a video, so we're going to start with that. It's about 26 minutes long because I didn't want to make it too long and boring for you guys. And then after the video, I wanted to just kind of open it up for Q&A and we can talk a little bit more, but I've got lots of other visuals and pictures and other things depending on what we want to talk about. So yeah, and I'm looking forward to talk moths with you this evening. So I guess, Emma, we're ready for the video when you are.
Can everyone see that?
Hi everyone, my name is Andalyn Tosselmeyer. I'm the Conservatory Manager and Naturalist at Cambridge Butterfly Conservatory, and I was very happy this year to again host an evening mothing event. If you don't know what mothing is all about, that's what we're going to do tonight, and I'll explain it all to you. It's unfortunate we couldn't do it in person. It's a lot more fun, but I hope to still give you a bit of a taste as to what it's all about, and also to open your eyes to the wonderful world of moths. It's kind of a underground, not very well-known world, but it's really amazing, and there's lots of diversity, and you never know what's going to be in your backyard. Whenever I do these evening mothing events, we actually start out by going around with nets and looking for moths. So we are going to do that in a moment while we wait for it to get darker. But I would like to show you right now the black light setup, what the real mothing is all about. So over here is my portable moth sheet setup. This is maybe on the fancier end of a black light setup. It doesn't need to be like this. It could just be a white blanket or a sheet that you put out against the side of your house, hanging from a tree. You could just use an incandescent bulb. It doesn't need to be super fancy. However, scientists do believe that using a black light, using ultraviolet, does attract a wider array of moths. So that's why I have a special black light here. It's not turned on quite yet. I'm going to wait till it gets a little bit darker soon. A white sheet is best for a couple of reasons. One, it kind of helps to reflect the UV light, so it can bring in moths from a wider area. And two, it's just easier to see the moths. So if you're a little familiar with moths already, you might know of their kind of stereotypical behavior that they are attracted to lights, which can often be to their detriment. So doing black lighting, doing evening mothing is kind of taking advantage of that. The light is drawing them in. Not that we're hurting them. You can see there's a mesh around the black light so the moths can't get upon it. It doesn't hurt them. But they're drawn into the light and then they rest on the sheet. And often, or hopefully, they will rest there for a while, give you long enough to come in, have a closer look. You can take some pictures, identify them, and that's when you get to see what is out there flying around. So one of my favorite things about moths is the diversity. We see butterflies usually more often because they fly during the day. A lot of moths fly at night, although not all of them do. But there are 16 times more moths than butterflies. So in Ontario, we get about 100, maybe 120 butterflies across the province. But it's estimated there are over 3,000 kinds of moths. And there's probably more, but we don't know because everybody studies butterflies more than moths, even though moths are just as important, if not even more important. And I can share more about that later too. And they're just as beautiful. They're even more mysterious because we don't know much about them. They're flying out there at night. You don't even know they're there until you put up a black light, and then they come in and you get to see them. So that's what we're going to do tonight. It's going to be a little tricky doing it by film because it's hard to do it after dark, but we're going to do our best. So for now, let's start walking around. We've got a great meadow wildflower field here. I'm going to grab my trusty net, and I'm going to show you a few different ways you could do this yourself. If you go around with a bug net, butterfly net, it's never a bad thing to be like a kid again and get a bug net in your hand and go out. Because, as I already mentioned, there's a lot of moths that actually fly during the day. And they're also just resting in the grass, and we kind of flush them out when we walk around. So I'm going to go around sweeping with my net. Sweeping is what's called when you sweep your net back and forth through the grass. I'm going to catch up some stuff. We're going to take a look at it together. All right, so let's go.
Got a mosquito bite.
The thing about mothing is you got to put up the mosquitoes for a little bit too while the sun goes down, which it is doing right now. It's a really brilliant red sunset, so that's why I look a little red right now, which is great though. The sun is setting. The not too distant future, it'll be below the horizon, then it'll start really getting dark, so I'll turn the black light on soon. Okay, so we were walking through the field looking for moths and whatever else we could find for literally less than 10 minutes, and I found tons of stuff. Some of the things that I was hoping to find just so I can show you. So this is where it's going to be a little awkward because some of these moths are not super big and they're in containers, but I'm going to do my best to kind of show you and also use pictures. So I thought this is where I could introduce two really good books if you want to get more into learning about moths and identifying them. This is the Bible that came out not too long ago now, a few years ago, which is the most comprehensive and the most pocket-sized. It's not a huge tome that you got to carry around, and it is full color pictures, but it's really nicely laid out, the Peterson Field Guide. But this is another one, Moths and Caterpillars of the North Woods, that I like to recommend. It's not comprehensive, but it has beautiful pictures, and what I like about it is also shows you the caterpillar and the moth it turns into. So this one is maybe a little less intimidating for a lot of people as well. And again, the pictures are great, so I kind of like to use both. Okay, so a few things we found that we always find when we do this in the evening, and I can guarantee you you will find if you go out anytime, there's one that is quite small. It's called a leaf roller. I'll show you a picture here. So the one thing about leaf rollers, though, is that they have a really distinctive shape. They're bell-shaped. Now, there's lots of different kinds of leaf rollers. Don't get intimidated at the beginning when you're getting into moths. You don't want to be overwhelmed with trying to learn every single species. Just start by learning the groups. So leaf rollers, as I said, are bell-shaped. I found when resting on a leaf, we'll probably have some come to the light. They readily come to the black light. And like their name suggests, as a caterpillar, they roll leaves and they eat inside that and they live inside there. So even if you're walking through the forest during the day and you see a dogwood or a maple tree with a whole bunch of leaves rolled up, chances are it's one of these. I also found a grass veneer moth, which doesn't sound like a whole lot. Now they are quite small. I don't know if it's going to sit still, but they characteristically hold their wings kind of rolled up around their body. And again, there's quite a few kinds of grass veneers. They also have what kind of looks like a fuzzy nose or a fuzzy snout, though they're actually part of their mouth parts, but they give them a distinctive look. And grass veneers are so called because their caterpillars live and eat in the grass, and so do the moths live amongst the grass. And when you scare them up, they'll fly and land, usually head down on a blade of grass, and look like a blade of grass, and they blend in really well. And there are some really beautiful grass veneers. This picture maybe doesn't do it justice, but there are some with gold and silver flecks on them, really beautiful if you get looking at them up close. All right, and one of the ones that I was hoping to find, which I had a good feeling we were going to find, is a great example of a day-flying one. I get people asking me all the time about this one, thinking it's a butterfly. So it's not going to sit still. It's called a Virginia Tennica, and it's really stunning. It has beautiful iridescent blue wings and an orange, bright orange head. So this one is quite distinctive. Bit of an awkward name. Some people say Tennica, some people say Tunica. Virginia Tennica. And again, here's the caterpillar. Kind of looks like a woolly bear, except it's yellow and white. You may have seen them before. And the Virginia Tennica moths have just started emerging from their cocoons. They're on the wing now. You'll see them flying during the day. So not every brightly colored thing out there you see is a butterfly. And sometimes these come to black lights as well. And speaking of how to tell a moth from a butterfly, I also did find a butterfly. One which I was hoping to find so that we could see the difference. Now I don't know where I put it. Okay. So I'll just show you a picture. This one is a small, rather drab little butterfly. It's called the ringlet. It's about the size of a quarter, so it's not very large. It does have a little bit of orange and brown on it and a little fake eye spot. Very common in open, grassy meadows and wildflower fields. And a lot of people think this is a moth just because it's brown. So do not judge a butterfly or moth by their color, because it can be either way. Butterflies can be brown, moths can be bright colors. So if you're looking at a moth or a butterfly in the hand, how do you know if it's a moth or butterfly? I get that question a lot, so I wanted to answer it tonight. You'll hear a few things. For example, butterflies rest with their wings closed, moths rest with them open, but that is not really true. There's so many variations to that. Don't go by that. Moths generally fly at nighttime, but as we just learned, there's a lot that fly during the day. So the best thing to go by is to look at the antenna. All right, and I have a visual as well. So butterfly antenna tend to be thin, wiry, with a club at the top. So like a golf club, they'll be wider. If it's a moth, they tend to be, not always, feathery.
Now these are very extreme examples. This is a kind of a silk moth, which hopefully we'll see later. They're really big feathery antennae. So they might not always be that obvious. For example, this might even be a Virginia Tennica. You might need to look at them a little more close up to see that they're kind of feathery. But also notice that they do not end in a club. They taper at the end. So the antenna is usually going to be your best clue, and then over time, when you get mothing more, you'll just get more familiar with what's a moth and what's a butterfly. And the last one I didn't expect to find, but it's a really fun one and pretty distinct. You can recognize this one anywhere. And it's called a plume moth. It's actually in with the Virginia Tennica. It's this little thin white one. But these ones are fun because they are T-shaped. They're kind of like an airplane. They hold their wings out at exactly right angles to their body. So when they rest, you will see that there's many kinds of plume moths that can be hard to tell apart. Even those of us who are really good at mothing are just happy to call them plume moths and leave it at that. So don't worry about trying to figure out what kind of plume moth. Okay. All right, so now that the sun's almost down and it's going to start getting darker, the real fun's going to begin soon. There's one other thing I want to show you, though, that can help you start to identify moths. And aside from color and pattern, it can help to go by silhouette. If you are into bird watching or know any birders, they often do this to help them identify birds as well. Go by the shape. And there's this really easy silhouette guide. This is in the Peterson book. And it can help you get familiar with some of the really bigger families or groups of moths. The biggest and most spectacular that we like to find at a black light that we like to get are the big silk moths. Now in real life, these silk moths are the size of my hand. They're huge, they're lovely, they're on the wing in June, so it'd be really great if some come tonight. But you can see some moths are more triangular, some can hold their body in really weird positions. And yeah, so we might refer to this as the night goes on, and just know that going by moth shapes will help you identify them as well. So as we were walking around waiting for it to get darker and waiting for some moths to come into the black light, I noticed this flower, which got me to thinking about the reasons why moths are important. I mean, I personally think they're beautiful and they're amazing, but aside from that, they are very important animals in the ecological framework, and this flower is one of the reasons why. Moths are a really important group of pollinators. Everybody thinks about bees and butterflies, but moths are the nighttime crew. And this is a kind of flower called a catchfly, which often blooms at nighttime, but it is also scented and designed to attract moths. So this is an example of one that actually is trying to attract moth pollinators, not butterflies. And there's many other examples like primrose. It's usually flowers that are white or yellow. They're paler colors, and they give off a really nice scent or perfume to draw in the moths. But aside from being pollinators, they're really an important part of the food chain, both as caterpillars and moths. And they're decomposers, mostly as caterpillars. They eat rotten leaves, rotten poop, rotten things as well. So those are just a few reasons why moths are actually very important in nature. Okay, I'm coming. Ooh, it's a tiger moth. Nice. Wait till it lands. All right, so it's almost 10:15 now, and it's getting pretty dark. This is when things are starting to pick up, although it's still rather quite early. So I'm just trying to get a bit of footage so you can see the kind of action that's going on around the black light. There's a lot of stuff here. Actually, most of this, it's not moths. And I did want to point out a few things that you often get coming to black lights that aren't moths. Usually the best moth blacklighting action is between 10:30 and midnight. So mothing is really an activity that's kind of for the night owls or the night moths, as it were. Harder if you like to wake up early in the morning. So here we have a whole bunch of beetles. I'm going to turn on my headlamp. And the one thing that you're probably most likely to confuse with a moth are caddisflies. Oh, of course it flew. And it kind of takes a bit of practice to tell a caddisfly from a moth, but caddisflies generally have really long antennae and their wings are held kind of tent-like over their body. So, and caddisflies are quite active at nighttime. This is a really nice caddisfly right here. Really long antenna. So, I mean, caddisflies are lovely, but they're not quite what we're looking for. There's lots of beetles, carabid ground beetles, aquatic diving beetles, little leaf hoppers, rove beetles, a whole bunch of stuff. So we're still waiting for a lot of moths to come in. There's one here that we were talking about earlier. This is a grass veneer. So again, see how its wings are kind of rolled almost cigar-like over its body. And I know the color isn't really good here, but this is one that has a nice kind of gold and silver on it. Here's another moth that just came and landed in. This one's called a carpet. This is the challenge of trying to video at nighttime, so I'm sorry this is kind of awkward, but again, hopefully it's giving you a bit of an idea about what blacklighting is all about. All right. Okay, so we've got some good distinctive moths coming in here that are worth pointing out. This is a very distinctively shaped one. See how the wings turn downward at the corners. So this one, I'm going to hold the book up right beside it. It's called the arched hook tip. It's a very common one, quite lovely. It's mimicking a dead leaf so that during the day it can blend in really well. So that's a great one. And then as we move down here, we have a few that belong to a very large group of moths called the Geometers. Sorry, there's a breeze, so the sheet keeps blowing in and out, and then my focus changes. Geometers are also known as the inchworms. So anytime you see an inchworm caterpillar, they become a geometrid moth. It's a really diverse group. So this is a really good example of one here. It can be kind of hard to generalize their shape. You'll see on the silhouette guide, there's actually 3 different silhouettes they give, but at least it's a start. This one here is very similar to the top. And then, yeah, the one that just flew in beside it, this is a lovely one. It's called the Oak Beauty, also a kind of geometrid. And it's very salt and peppery, gray and white, but quite large though. That's almost a 2-inch long wingspan. We have a really nice one coming and land. This is a tiger moth. They're a really beautiful, stunning group of moths. Not the largest we get, but they're always boldly patterned for a reason, because they are actually poisonous or distasteful to bats, who are one of their main predators. So on the silhouette sheet, it shows a tiger moth kind of with its wings folded over its body. They don't always, I find them also very triangular, like this one shown here. And we get many or several kinds of tiger moths. As you can see, they often have really brightly colored hindwings as well. So this is a great example of one here. They can also sometimes be kind of tricky to tell apart. The patterns on the wings can be quite variable, but this looks to me like some kind of virgin tiger moth. And there was another kind of tiger moth up here, which I guess after explaining how they have bold patterns, this one does not. There are some that are white. This is the Virginian tiger moth, kind of like the snow white moth. And then it flew and landed over here. This little one here may not be a whole lot to look at, but they're kind of cute and very common, quite distinctive. They are in that geometer or inchworm family, but they are distinctive on their own. They're called a pug. I don't know why. And the silhouette for them is pretty distinctive, so they made it on this silhouette sheet. So this is one kind of pug. This one's kind of faded. I'm not really sure what kind it is. The green pug and the gray pug are two of the most common we see. So there's another really neat moth that flew in here that's fun to talk about because it's called the Tufted bird dropping moth. This is actually a pretty common strategy for a lot of moths to look like bird poo, because, you know, that's not very appealing to a lot of predators. So if you try to look like bird poo, things might leave you alone. This one is called the Tufted bird dropping moth. This is a really cute one that I always like when it flies in. It's got a pretty characteristic almost X mark through the wings, an X of white. And it has a fun name too. It's called the pink-barred Pseudostratia. Also kind of mimicking bird dropping. Sometimes just the names of a lot of moths are fun. Looks like we've even had a couple plume moths come in to the light. So here are two other examples of plume moths for you to see with the characteristic T-shape. And a little grass veneer. Here's another of those snow white tiger moths. It's really fresh. You can even see the two black spots on the outside of the wing. And a bit more over here, if it sits still, yeah, it's a very beautiful one called the small magpie. It's actually not native to Ontario. Like a lot of insects that you encounter these days, was introduced, but still quite lovely to look at. A whole bunch of stuff coming in here. Most of these are caddisflies. This is a moth. It's called the Beeswax Moth, actually. This is a very triangular shaped moth called a crambid. And check it out here on the top of my barbecue. Sorry, the lighting is really bad, but if you see the characteristic bell shape, that's another leaf roller. The oblique banded leaf roller. And here is another kind of geometer. It's another kind of inchworm moth that's very common. It's the lesser maple spanworm. You can see how it holds its wings, quite similar to the other geometers we've seen. Got a bunch of caddisflies here. Here's another grass veneer. And this is another kind of white tiger moth, kind of faded. And then here's another leaf roller. Rather bell-shaped, maybe not as much as the other ones we've seen. Oh, there's another white tiger moth that can't quite seem to land. This is another green pug, another kind of geometer. The handsome one, called a Tussock Moth. Got these nice golden orange patterns on it. So instead of also going black lighting, you can just go out and look at some flowers after dark and see who's nectaring at them. And this is a lovely little moth. It's called a litter moth. I'm sorry, it's really hard to focus when it's dark here. And litter moths are one of the great examples of ones that act as decomposers, as caterpillars, as adult. Hi everyone, my name is Andalyn Toffelmeyer. I'm the Conservatory Manager and Naturalist at Cambridge Butterfly Conservatory, and I was very happy this year to again host an evening.
Okay. All right, thanks, Emma, and thank you for being patient, everyone. I know it was a little choppy and not the best quality, but that was the best I could do. So I don't know, have any of you ever seen anything like that before? People hanging around a glowing light after dark? Believe it or not, it is a thing. So here's the part of the evening where you can have a bit of dialogue. If you want to shout out a question, I think that's okay. I don't really know how this works with Zoom, or you could type it in on the chat side if you want. Totally up to you. Or maybe just wave and then I'll know you have a question and I could let you ask it. Somebody already typed a question in the chat, so I could start with that one, and it was a good one. Why do people seem to be more afraid of moths than butterflies? And I do think that is true to a certain extent. My best theory as to why is that moths tend to be a little bit more erratic flyers than butterflies. And I think that kind of freaks some people out. I also think moths have got a bit of a bad rap over the years in the terms of people tend to associate moths with, they eat my clothes, they're pests, they fly into the light, they get stuck on my hair, I don't know, weird stuff like that, but that's not always true. But maybe once you just get used to them, you find you're not so scared about them anymore. Yeah, it's, oh, hey, here's a moth right here. This is great.
This guy, I raised him from a caterpillar and he just hatched this morning. Raised
Oh,
him as
wow.
a caterpillar on lilacs last year.
Nice.
And it's a male. He has a big, I don't know whether you can see them, but he has the big antennae there.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 of them hatched this morning from the 5 cocoons I had. So I'm going to release him this evening. He's brand new and fresh, and he's a Sucropia.
Yeah, that's really exciting.
Yeah, I haven't seen a wild one for a couple of years at least. I found one caterpillar last summer, and it was parasitized.
Yes, that happens.
Yeah, it happens a lot, but they're really spectacular. So he goes free tonight. Hopefully he'll find a girlfriend.
Sure.
So I just thought it would I was signed up for this, and it just happened this morning. So I thought, oh great, maybe I'll get a chance to show them to people.
Yeah, that's show and tell is great. Those are one of the kinds of moths that I would have hoped had come to my black light, but they didn't, which is too bad.
Yeah.
But
there's a fellow called Bill Lamond down by Hamilton, and he does one of the a night like that every couple of years, and I try to get to it each time. So
yeah, great.
he does it in one of the forests nearby.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just take this guy back out.
Okay, sure. Thanks for sharing. So he had the Sucropia moth is what it's called. It is the largest native one we get in Ontario. So that was a great example you could see there. I've raised a few myself. All I have now are empty cocoons. This is kind of what one came out of before. And being a silk moth, they are the largest ones. Here's the silhouette guide that I was using. And you can see kind of relative to many of the other groups of moths, they're pretty big. Sucropia, Luna moth, Polyphemus. Actually, it's interesting you had one come out so fortuitously. I was doing a moth presentation a few years ago at McGregor Point Provincial Park, and that very day, a Polyphemus moth came out of a cocoon that I had brought along to show everyone. So they got to see it, and we finished the presentation with taking it outside, letting it go. It was, I could have planned it better. So thank you for bringing a live moth.
A pleasure.
That's
It was
great.
just good luck to have him.
Yeah.
and very exciting.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
just talking about moths, and
yeah.
it was a great presentation. I have to say, you're a good teacher, and
Okay.
obviously knowledgeable and passionate.
Thank you. Well, I do hope to inspire a few more people to at least take a closer look at moths, because the more you get looking, the more you see. And even if you don't feel like staying up till midnight sometimes to see moths, you do end up finding them in more places once you kind of start looking for them. Even if you go for an afternoon stroll, it is amazing what you see. Somebody else here on the chat has asked another good question. What are the biggest threats to moth populations? Does that include habitat destruction? And for sure, yeah, loss of habitat is probably one of the biggest things for insects all across the board, and our heavy chemical use that we have employed over the last couple of decades. But the sad thing is, because moths haven't been as well studied, we're not as familiar with the exact decline their numbers may be showing. So mothing is kind of becoming a little bit more popular, and it is a citizen science that you can get involved with. If I have time near the end, it's actually coming up next month. A bunch of really passionate people started up what's called National Moth Week. And if you want to Google it, you'll find their webpage. And it's a week in July every year. And you can host a mothing event or you can attend one. So if you're interested to see if there's something going around or something going on around your neighborhood, you could go on there and you can learn more too. But yeah, the more people, and if people use iNaturalist, maybe you've heard of that app where you can take pictures of animals or plants in nature and upload it. That also contributes to our understanding of where moths are, how abundant they may be. Some moths are tricky. They can be locally abundant in one area, like Sucropia moths seem to be pretty common in the Waterloo region. I get emails about them a lot. But then you could go a 2-hour drive away and they never see them. So it's kind of interesting. I think that's kind of with Luna moths too. Great, here's another question someone's asking. Did you say that moths are primarily nocturnal? And they are. Now, not all of them. It is a generalization to say that all moths fly at nighttime, but they are primarily nocturnal, and most of them are. So, what is it? Yeah, maybe that's another reason why people are a little nervous about moths, is because they surprise you in the dark. See, I think that's part of their allure, that you don't know they're out there until they kind of all of a sudden, they mysteriously come out of the dark and they're there. But maybe that's what makes some people nervous about them. I'm not sure. I can show you an example of one of the world's largest moths, which is also a silk moth, like the Sucropia that we saw a few minutes ago. Okay, I don't have a live one, unfortunately, but we do get them at the conservatory. This is called an Atlas moth, and you can see it's like the size of my face. So this is one of the world's largest moths, generally speaking, and another really large silk moth, a night flying one. And then this is a good example of a day flying one. And sorry, glare. Here we go. So generally speaking, many of the day flying moths are brightly colored, which can make them harder to identify and tell them apart from butterflies. But that's just kind of part of the fun challenge. Yeah, I know. You look at this and you would totally think it's a butterfly. And if it makes you feel any better, scientists even called it a butterfly for a long time until they took a closer look. I wish I could see one like this someday in real life. They're native to Madagascar and some of the more tropical regions of the world. But I've seen pictures and videos before of people out during the day, and there were dozens of moths like these coming to mud puddles. That would just be so amazing to see. Butterflies and moths readily drink mud, water and salts and minerals from puddles. So that's a good way to see them. If we're waiting for people to think of more questions or anything, like I did have a few more pictures I could show. The mothing that I did over the last week, I did it more than once, but the weather this last week was a little challenging. It wasn't the most spectacular mothing. I was hoping more things would have come in, and that's just part of the fun of mothing. Some nights can be really good, some are not. It's kind of a jackpot, and I guess that's partly what keeps you on the edge of your seat, wondering what's going to happen. But I have a couple pictures of evening mothing I've done in Arizona, where that was the best I've experienced. I was literally standing in a cloud of moths. It was amazing. When I describe evening mothing to some of my friends, they don't like the idea of being standing in a cloud of insects. So I will say that maybe that's not for everybody. You have to not be too paranoid of bugs flying all around you, because as you saw from my video, there were a variety of other insects coming in. And if you're mothing in an area where it's usually a little more tropical, it's amazing. There can be so many. Sometimes you have to put earplugs or Kleenex in your ears to keep them from flying in. It's happened before. I've been at mothing events where if you didn't do that, somebody got a moth in their ear, and then somebody had to drive over to the hospital and get it taken out. So, but that's pretty extreme. So if it's all right, could I maybe show you some of those pictures for a moment? It won't take very long. And yeah, somebody else here is saying, when I lived in Belize, moths would swarm our headlamps. Yeah, and bats would come in. You know, I've had that happen before. Okay, not with bats necessarily, but when if you keep your moth sheet up long enough, there have been predators like centipedes and some other, and spiders. I got a picture of a jumping spider that was totally hunting the moths that were coming into my sheet one night. Okay, so here's where I'm just going to hit share screen for a minute and show you a couple of these pictures.
There's another question there. Do you know anything about the black witch moth in Mexico and other places? They think having one by your home means someone will pass away or something bad will happen.
I have been fortunate enough to see one in Arizona because they are native to Mexico. So farther south than here. I might have a picture of one, just a minute. There have been a few records of them showing up in Ontario, but not very often. If one showed up, that would be pretty big news and people would be excited. Well, mothers would be excited to see it. And it rivals the Sucropia in terms of size. Okay, this picture won't do it justice. Male and female has a bit of a white bar. The silhouette in the background shows you a bit more of the life size. I think they're really neat. They've got beautiful subtle markings of kind of purple and pink and black. But yes, they are a good example of where, culturally speaking, people have tended to associate moth with death or bad things happening. It looks like somebody else saw one in Jamaica. That's great. I wish we got them around here. That would be really fun. All right, so here, let me show you just a few more pictures of what evening mothing can be like. Okay, hopefully you guys can see these here. So this was me at one of the Arizona nights. There's an insect conference that I go to usually, and this is what we do for fun. So there are other people out there that love to do this. It is a pretty community inspiring thing. I mean, it's just like, instead of sitting around a campfire, people sit around a black light and you chat and you're having a good time. You see bugs come in. So you can see there's some, if you can see my mouse, there were these great big Sphinx moths coming in. There's a whole bunch in the air. Let's see if I can scroll. Here we go. So this was a different kind of setup these people had. This is actually not a UV light. This is a much more powerful light called a mercury vapor bulb, which is even more powerful. So it can draw in moths from even farther away. And then we put up this lots of surface area for the moths to land, which is easier. And you can see lots of the buzzing activity going on here.
Are you able to enlarge them? Or maybe if you...
Or like if I zoom in?
Well, they're just thumbnails. So
oh, no.
Or maybe if you open it and then stop share and then share again.
Okay, sorry guys, hold on while we do technology thing here. Yeah, on my screen it looks full size, but Is that a little bit better?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, okay, there we go. Sorry. So I'll just go back if it's gonna let me now. That was just the picture before, the different, kind of a different setup you can do. This is a kind of Sphinx moth, which is another really exciting and beautiful group of moths that there's lots common here in Ontario. This is the Whiteline Sphinx, which is found way across North America. They're a very streamlined shaped moth for good reason. They're really strong flyers. So whereas sometimes people tend to associate moths with being really fluttery, these are not so much. They're like a little jet plane moth. They'll zoom in, very strong flying, and a lot of them are day flying, very important pollinators. I don't know if it's good. Oh, there we go. So here was a couple, like look at the beautiful bold markings on this one. This was a cute little fuzzy moth with bright orange hind wings. Another strategy that many moths do, they'll be drab or brown colored on top so that they could camouflage, and then if something startles them, they can kind of flash these brightly colored hind wings to maybe scare them away. And then this is another, the top left is another kind of sphinx called the rustic sphinx. But this is a bit more of an example of what a bit more of a thrilling evening mothing event could maybe be like. Big moths coming in small ones. Moths are divided into two general groups: macro moths, which are maybe about as big as your thumb and larger, and then micro moths, which can be quite tiny. And most of the moths out there are tiny. But again, if you get looking at them closer, they're beautiful. You had a kind of scarab beetle come in. So the top left is another kind of sphinx. The one on the far right, the yellow one with this black line through the middle, is another geometer inchworm moth called the yellow slant line. Very descriptive name. And then this really nice yellow one at the bottom is another one of our Ontario silk moths called the Iomoth. Not super common, at least not as common as Sucropias. So I always get excited when I see them. This was just us hanging around the light. As I said, mothing is a pretty late night activity. You can easily be up to 1 a.m. or later, so it makes for later nights. Oh, this was just me being a little abstract, but I thought it was kind of fun to see, to give you an idea of the activity that goes on around the light itself. Hopefully the pictures are still showing up okay. This is another picture of the Iomoth, where you can see the stunning fake eye spots at the bottom. Another startle technique the moth can use to scare something away.
Sting you with its bristles.
And yeah, there's sometimes several dozen of us that do these mothing events. Lots of fun. Bring your camera out. As I say, it can be a really fun social event. And, you know, this is maybe from more the perspective of a moth. You're flying around at night and all of a sudden you see this glowing thing over there. So you come in to check it out, and that's why moths are drawn in. Now this is just back to usually what my husband and I do with our portable setup. Sometimes we like to go back more in the field where I didn't show you very well in the video, but I have a portable battery pack that I can plug the blacklight into. So we're not tied to being somewhere near an outlet with an extension cord. Yeah, we just sit around, we look. I have heard a couple other suggestions where if you put a black light in the middle and white sheets on either side, again, that's giving lots more surface area for moths to come in. So that's another good idea if you guys ever want to try it on your own. This is another one of the mercury vapor bulbs. But just another tip, if you go camping, I don't know if we're going to be able to go camping to Ontario parks this summer, but the comfort stations are a great place to go looking for moths because the lights are on, they're left on all night, and the moths are drawn in. And I like to go around sometimes in the morning or in the afternoon, and you'll still find some moths resting there, and then you can take some pictures and look at them. So, you know, try not to be too creepy, I guess, walking around the comfort stations all the time, but you can see some really neat things. Okay, I'm just going to exit out of there for a minute. Go back to our chat. Okay, there we go. Does anyone have any other questions about either specific moths or what mothing is about? Are all moths fuzzy? That's a good question. I get that quite a bit. Not all moths. The Sphinx moth that I showed you a few minutes ago in that picture, I know it wasn't very enlarged for you, but they're a good example of ones that aren't super fuzzy. So not all of them are, but it certainly makes them pretty endearing when they're fuzzy. The silk moths generally can be pretty fuzzy looking, and it just makes everybody like, oh, they're so cute when they see them. As to why they're fuzzy, I don't have a solid answer, but again, my educated guess is that it can sometimes have something to do with their ability to thermoregulate, because a lot of moths are nocturnal, flying at nighttime when it can maybe be a little cooler. So the scales, which is what makes them look fuzzier, might be helping to kind of keep them warmer. And we don't often think about it, but the scales covering butterflies and moths also can kind of make them slippery. So if a predator like a bird might try to grab one, those scales very readily flake off. I've even tried to grab one out of the net before, and I thought I had a good firm grip on it, and it just like slid right out of my hand and flew away. So they could also potentially kind of readily get rid of scales, almost like some geckos and lizards can break off their tail really easily to get away.
If may I?
Yeah.
If you watch some of the bigger fuzzy looking moths, you're absolutely right about thermoregulation. They actually generate body heat by vibrating their wing muscles. And a lot of them can't fly until they start shivering. And they do that shivering to warm up their thorax, and the thorax, the middle part with the wings coming out, is the fuzzy part, and the fluffiness keeps the heat in, just the way it does in a mink or a cat or a wolf. And when they generate enough heat, then they've got the power to fly. And a lot of the big ones, like sphinxes and giant silkworms and the bigger noctuids, have to do that to fly.
Yeah, totally. And it would make sense for the larger moths too, because they have even more mass they've got to warm up then. So it's even more important that they retain that heat. Yeah, good one. Someone asked, what is my favorite species? That's a hard one. I love the color yellow, so I think I'm always biased towards the yellow moths, if it's the Io or the tiger moths or anything. But here, I'm just trying to find a picture. These are more the silk moths we've been referring to. The gentleman here had a Sucropia come out this morning that he was showing us, and the beautiful green Luna moth is one that everybody usually likes to see. I am a little partial to the Luna moth as well, also because when my husband and I married, actually one of our wedding gifts from someone was a Luna moth cocoon, which was really neat. I held on to it all throughout the winter, and in the spring the Luna moth emerged and we got to let it go. That was pretty cool. So I think I have a soft spot for them. Someone else is asking, do moths stay within their area like birds? That's a good question. Probably generally. Some moths are pretty strong flyers and they could disperse. As to how far away, I wouldn't know what to hazard a guess, but most moths are going to kind of stay locally where they have come out of the cocoon. They want to find a mate sooner than later. I mean, most moths as an adult moth are living for a matter of weeks, some even less. So yeah, they probably don't go to, especially if they've got habitat. I mean, if a female who's ready to lay eggs is finding lots of great host plants, she's likely maybe just going to stay right there. But I will say, just for interest's sake, that there are some moths that are migratory. I might be able to find a picture really quickly here, because this is an example I like to show. A lot of people talk about the monarch that migrates and things like that, but there's actually in Greece, really trying to find it here, It's called, or Rhode Island, it's called the Valley of the Butterflies, but it's a moth. And there's a kind of Jersey tiger moth that they undergo a migration from north to a bit farther south to this valley where it's cooler. They do that in the heat of the summer because they're actually looking to escape the heat, and they go to this valley or this island where it's cooler. So just an example of a moth that flies farther afield. And of course I can't find the picture right now, sorry. Someone else is asking, often a small gray moth will get in through our doors. I try to carefully cut them up, put them outside. However, the gray comes off my fingers. Will they survive? What are they called? What is their life cycle? So that's great. That ties into the discussion we were having just a few minutes ago about the scales. That gray stuff that came off on your fingers are the scales, which if we have time, I might be able to show you a picture, but just picture in your mind fish scales or snake scales, a lot smaller though, and they overlap and they're softer. So it's okay. Moths and butterflies can lose a surprising amount of their scales and they're still okay. So they're probably fine. Without, I think, seeing a picture, I don't know exactly what kind of gray moth it is you're referring to, so I maybe can't talk about its exact life cycle. But a lot of them, it's pretty quick. They could be in the egg for just a few days. Caterpillars, maybe a few weeks, unless they have to become a really big moth. They might be a caterpillar for all summer. And most of our moths overwinter as cocoons, but not all. Okay. I'm trying to think if there's any other pictures I could show. Anybody else have any questions, or if you wanted to jump in with an observation or anything? Someone's asking, how long do they live average when they are moths? As an adult moth, average it's a few weeks. The silk moths like the Sucropia, the Luna, even the big Atlas moth that I showed you in a frame, it might be a week or less. Interestingly, it may sound sad, but the silk moths as a family actually don't have mouth parts when they're a moth, and they can't eat. So they can only eat as a caterpillar, and they have to store as much energy and fat and everything in their body that way and carry it forward into the moth, and then they just live off that. So they don't live as long, but you know, I think they still have it pretty good. They've been feasting as caterpillars for one whole summer, so. In the interest of time, and also because I want to be respectful of everybody and not go too over time, we might just, if anybody has the last few questions, I can talk about those, but I'll probably start to wrap up in the next few minutes. I can finish by showing you just a few slides from a presentation that I usually do, also because I just want you guys to have my email address, because I always encourage people to email me pictures or questions. I love that. That's great. And I always love to see what people are discovering on their own.
That's okay.
And I don't know if I go to share my screen, if I'll be able to see the chat. So if you're asking questions that way, I might see them at the end. So, I'm going to do this screen share one more time, if that's all right. Just bear with me for 1 second. I'm going to get it ready here. Okay. Slideshow. Current slide. Oh, sorry guys, just a sec. Here we are. This is my first time with Zoom, actually. I don't know how much you guys actually use it, but
You're doing great.
Woo, thank you. Okay, can you see the screen? Yeah? Cool. So just one more time, because I shared, sorry. Woo! Okay, now I've showed you, but this is also a really fun one. I guess people sometimes ask what's one of my favorites. And this is the ever lovable woolly bear caterpillar. that you'll see a lot in the fall. I mean, we do tend to get a couple generations, but usually it's the fall you see them. And it becomes a great moth called the Isabella tiger moth. Jim de Rivières is from Ottawa, and he's done a lot of really great kind of macro photography of moths. He had a website, which I believe is still up and running if you want to go on there and just see some great pictures. And just so you know, there actually are some places in the States that have a Woolly Bear Festival if you ever want to go to one. I thought they have Woolly Bear races and everything. But I referenced some books in my video, so just one more time, if you want to read more and learn a little bit more on your own, these are some others. The one you're seeing in the upper left is the older version of the Peterson guide. It used to be all we had. It might be out of print now, but it's still worth getting your hands on if you really want to get into it. Discovering Moths by John Himmelman is just a really pleasant read. It's not an ID guide. It's not necessarily a it's not supposed to be like a factual read, but John Himmelman's a great nature writer, and you'll learn lots of fun facts about moths if you find that book. And if you want to ID and learn more about caterpillars, this Princeton Field Guide, the one on the lower right, is, I would recommend, the best one out there, Caterpillars of Eastern North America. It's a question I get quite a bit too. People ask me, what is this caterpillar going to turn into? And because there's over 3,000 kinds of moths in Ontario, chances are if you find a caterpillar, it's going to become a moth, not a butterfly. So most of them are moths. And the moths and caterpillars of the Northwoods, a really small, portable paperback one, beautiful pictures. You should be able to get that one out of the library, I think. And then if you really want to get serious about ID, this new Peterson Field Guide to Moths is probably your most user-friendly one to go by.
What do you want?
I will say, when you get into moth ID, it's not always about color. It's about pattern recognition. So try not to get too hung up on the color of moths. You have to really look at the lines, and if a line is solid or dashed, and hardcore stuff like that. This is just another really great caterpillar book. This one is really big and very heavy, so not necessarily field guide, but it deals with one of the largest groups of moths, the owlet caterpillars. Okay, and so to finish up, that's the National Moth Week that I was mentioning. Again, another fun place to go if you want to learn more, or maybe try to go to another mothing event. I'm not sure what they're doing this year because of COVID-19, probably a lot of virtual things as well. And hopefully it'll be happening next spring, but I do offer a moth workshop through the University of Guelph Arboretum. So if you really want to get into the hardcore and come out for a whole day of moth ID, stay tuned. We're going to try and do that next year. And there's my email address at the bottom. If you do want to reach out to me, go for it. If you see a moth a few weeks from now and you want to know what it is, send it my way and I can help you out. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. And yeah, it is 9:30, so we'll probably finish. Thank you once more for everyone who came out on this Friday night. And maybe again sometime in the future you'll be able to join me for an actual in-person moth blacklighting event.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. And yeah, check out our social media, 2Rivers Festival, on Facebook and Twitter.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Bye.